The morning mist hovered over the vast savanna as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the thick clouds. In the distance, the tribe of Homo habilis stirred their movements, careful and calculated like shadows in the early light. The hunt had begun, but not in the way most would expect. There were no large animals to chase, no bison or antelope to bring down. Instead, the tribe's survival depended on something far smaller yet equally vital: insects. The young hunters, lean and alert, moved swiftly through the tall grasses, their eyes scanning every inch of the land. A single sound, a flicker of movement, could signal the arrival of their meal or a predator. The leaders, stoic and unwavering, had taught them well patience was the key. Each hunter held a simple tool, a sharpened stick used not for the large beasts, but for insects, their primary source of sustenance. They had learned to trap, scoop, and catch with a finesse that came from necessity. The sun had barely risen, but the land was already beginning to heat up, the relentless sun bearing down on the tribe. The ground beneath their feet was dry and cracked, a stark reminder of the scarcity that plagued their world. The rivers, once full, were now little more than trickling streams, and the trees that dotted the landscape were sparse, their leaves barely clinging to life. But the tribe had adapted. They knew that survival in this world meant finding food where others saw none. Their stomachs might have ached with hunger, but the bounty of the earth, the endless insects buzzing above, hidden beneath rocks, or swarming near the sparse pools of water, offered the hope of life. A young woman, her face covered in the dirt of the land, crouched low to the ground. Her fingers, nimble and skilled, reached into a pile of dried leaves. There, hidden among the foliage, was her prize, a swarm of beetles. She grasped them carefully, collecting them in the woven basket at her side. The tribe had learned not only to survive, but to thrive on what others might consider insignificant. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The earth was shifting, as it often did, but when danger approached. A rival tribe had appeared on the horizon, their figures barely visible against the brightening sky. The tribe's leader stood tall, his eyes narrowing. He signaled to his people a quiet command to prepare. The rival tribe had long been a threat, but the struggle for survival had taken on a new urgency. The fight for food had intensified over the years, and now the insects, the very sustenance the tribe depended on, had become a battleground. The tension in the air was thick, but the tribe, united by their shared struggle, stood ready to face whatever would come. Without a word, the two tribes moved toward each other. The young hunters gripped their tools tightly, ready for whatever conflict might arise. The battle for survival was not just about finding food. It was about protecting the future of their people. The leader's gaze remained fixed on the rival tribe, his body tense, awaiting the inevitable clash. The conflict erupted suddenly, the tension from the gathering storm breaking with swift violence. The rival tribe, desperate and hungry, charged forward with crude weapons, stone-tipped spears, jagged rocks tied to long branches. The ground shook as they advanced, their eyes wild with the desperation of survival. The tribe of Homo habilis, caught off guard but not unprepared, braced themselves. The leader, though old, had fought many battles before. He raised his hand, signaling his hunters to fan out. They knew this land, every crevice, every corner, every tree that could be used for cover. The hunters dropped to their knees, their bodies low against the earth, as the rival tribe approached. The young woman, clutching her basket of beetles, instinctively darted behind a large boulder. She could hear the enemy's feet crunching the dry ground beneath them, the noise loud and ominous. The scent of blood, of battle, was in the air. A loud crack split the silence the first strike had been made. One of the young hunters from the rival tribe lunged forward, aiming his spear toward the leader of the Homo habilis tribe. But before the strike could land the tribe's strongest hunter, a tall and agile figure darted forward, knocking the spear away with a quick swipe of his stone-tipped weapon. The clash echoed through the savannah, a thunderous reminder of the high stakes they all faced. The battle was swift and brutal, as survival often was. The tribe's hunters, experienced and cohesive, fought back with a precision born of years of struggle. Their blows were swift, their movements practiced, honed through necessity. But there was a certain hesitation, a strange reluctance to kill. Both tribes knew that the real enemy was not one another. It was the land, the scarcity, the insects that had become their lifeline. This battle, though fierce, was a desperate act of self-preservation, not conquest. In the midst of the chaos, the young woman clutched her basket of beetles tightly, not daring to drop it. She understood the stakes. These tiny creatures were not just food, they were survival itself. Her heart pounded in her chest, her eyes darting between the skirmish unfolding before her, and the insects in her hands, her fingers moving nervously, but steadily. The sound of the battle began to fade into the background as the leader of the Homo habilis tribe raised his voice. He was not a man of words, but in this moment his voice carried the weight of 1,000 generations. His call was not one of violence, but of unity, of survival, against the overwhelming odds that nature had thrown at them. His people, weary from the fight, looked to him for guidance. Slowly the weapons lowered, and the dust began to settle. A silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the distant sound of wind rustling the tall grass. The rival tribe, sensing the futility of the conflict, began to retreat. They had come for food, but in the end, they realized that taking from the Homo habilis tribe would not bring them the survival they sought. The tribe of Homo habilis stood together, their eyes fixed on the horizon. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The land remained unforgiving, the insects still their only true sustenance. As the young woman stepped forward, she offered the basket of beetles to the leader, who accepted them with a nod of gratitude. The tribe, though scarred by the battle, was still intact. They would survive together. As the rival tribe disappeared into the distance, retreating back into the dense savanna, the Homo habilis tribe gathered in a circle. Their bodies were bruised, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat, but their spirits were unbroken. The battle had been intense, but it had only reinforced their bond. They knew that surviving was not just about physical strength, it was about unity, trust, and the knowledge that they could face any challenge together. The leader, his face weathered and worn, looked over his people. His eyes, though tired, were filled with a quiet pride. He knew that today had not been just a battle over insects. It had been a test of their resolve, their ability to adapt, to live in harmony with the land and its harsh realities. As they sat around the fire that evening, the flames casting long shadows over their faces, the tribe's elders began to speak in hushed tones. The younger hunters gathered around, their curiosity piqued by the stories that had been passed down for generations. The young woman who had collected the beetles stepped forward, her basket now empty, but her hands steady. She looked into the leader's eyes, her voice low but certain. "We survived today," she said, "but the land grows harsher. The insects, they are our future. We must find more." The leader nodded, understanding the weight of her words. They had lived off the land for generations, learning to read its signs, to understand the rhythms of nature. But now the land was changing, and so too must they. The insects that had once seemed insignificant had become their lifeline. Without them, their survival would be uncertain. But even as the realization settled over the tribe, a sense of hope began to grow. They had faced the storm, both literal and metaphorical, and they had emerged stronger. Their unity had carried them through the battle. Their connection to each other, to the land, and to the small creatures that had given them life was unbreakable. As the stars began to twinkle in the dark sky above the tribe, gathered together for a shared meal, it was not a feast by any means, but it was enough. The sound of their laughter, quiet but genuine, filled the air as they passed around the meager offering of insects. It was not just food, it was a symbol of their resilience, their ability to adapt, and their unshakable will to survive. In that moment, the Homo habilis tribe knew one thing for certain: they would continue to endure, together.